A very warm welcome to the third edition of the India Day at the UNGA. Reliance Foundation and the Observer Research Foundation have been working together to bring together thought leaders, political leaders, industry, and civil society members to come and debate some of the most important issues that affect our development future. We have had the privilege of partnering with the Indian Permanent Mission to the UN and the Council General in New York to put together convenings that have seen diverse voices through the day today and have shared ideas, hopes, challenges and opportunities that all of us must navigate in the days ahead. Dr. S. Jaishankar, Minister of External Affairs India, and Madam Jaishankar. Minister Hilton Todd from Guyana. Baiba, Braz, Minister for Foreign Affairs Latvia. Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, Group Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, DP World. Borge, Brende, President, World Economic Forum. Ambassador P. Harish, India's Permanent Representative to the UN. Isha Ambani, Director, Reliance Foundation. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this evening of conversations amongst a community of people who are committed to make the world a better place. Many years ago, as the Observer Research Foundation created its first platform in the African continent, a friend of ours in Rwanda alerted us to a Swahili saying, "The story of the hunt would always glorify the hunter until the tigers learned how to tell their tale." Global development policy has been shaped by this paradigm as well. All international agreements, financial commitments, political imperatives have privileged the interests of the developed world and the rich countries. The donors have scripted our development future, have moderated our ambitions and aspirations, and have disregarded our concerns and vital interests at crucial moments in our contemporary history. We are now at a different moment. This can change, must change, and will change. The rise of the global south and the significance of the emergence of large economies from this group allows us, for the first time, the ability to write our own futures, script our solutions, help our communities, and in the near future, even fund our own endeavors. Together, we gather here as a community when the world has signed the Pact for the Future a few days ago and resolved to transform global governance. Voices from the South must partner within and with their counterparts in the North to define the rest of the journey to 2030 and, more importantly, what follows thereafter. This panel today will seek to discuss this moment where the tiger has begun to script the tale of its own future. But before we move to this evening's conversation, the highlight panel, we have two very special speakers who will address us tonight. Let me first invite Ambassador P. Harish, India's Permanent Representative to the UN, to deliver the welcome remarks. Ambassador, the mic is yours.
Thank you, dear Samir. Dr. Jaishankar, External Affairs Minister of India, and Madam Jaishankar, Honorable Ministers of Foreign Affairs of Latvia and Guyana, the Group Chairman of DP World and President World Economic Forum, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We have just heard from Samir, the old African proverb. It's actually the lion in the proverb. But as we assemble here in New York in the immediate adoption of the Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future and its annexures, the Global Compact and the Vision for Future Generations, we review what was it that prompted this huge gathering of world leaders in New York, including my Prime Minister. There was an intense need for a reboot for the development paradigm for the whole globe after 2 years of the pandemic and 2 years of numerous conflicts around the world. We have missed our Sustainable Development Targets and Agenda 2030. In the various Voice of the Global South summits convened by my Prime Minister over the last 2 years, the single cry of help that came out from various countries of the global south was focused on the problems faced due to debt and the triple problems of food inflation, fuel, and fertilizer inflation. Yet, a coordinated approach from the international community and the multilateral system was not forthcoming. It was under these circumstances that all of us, all nations, cooperated together to come out with this pact for the future. During the last decade, when people look at India, they look at our actions, which actually speak louder than words. The development paradigm in India, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, has been focused on using new age technologies to leapfrog development processes. What would normally take 10 to 20 years, due to leveraging of such technological platforms, has enabled us to reach in much, much shorter periods of time. Whether it is bringing in a couple of 100 million women as part of financial inclusion, whether it is in vaccinating a population of 1.4 billion people twice over during the course of the pandemic, whether it was delivering educational services to children across the country using digital platforms, or enabling commerce through digital means, the leveraging of technology has helped this. At the same time, India was also very conscious that for the tiger to tell its tale, the tiger needs a microphone. And it was this that under our G20 leadership, under our G20 presidency, we brought in the African Union as a member of the G20, something that was long awaited, not delivered before, but it was under our presidency, it was done. Giving a seat at the high table and giving a microphone so that the tail of the tiger can be heard was a very important aspect of India's global partnership, especially in reaching out to our friends in the developing world and the global south. Friends, a few other developments of the last decade. How to manage technology and how to manage the frameworks for their governance has emerged as a huge issue. Accessibility and affordability have been defining elements in this. As the Pact for the Future comes with a compact, the digital compact, I think a lot of the future efforts are also on how we manage this technology and its governance so that developing countries have an equal say and benefit from these new age technologies that would help them leapfrog their growth and development process. Last but not the least, there has been a huge focus on youth in the Summit of the Future. How do we take the step to involve youth in governance within countries? How do we involve their energy, innovation, and dynamism for economic and developmental processes has been a huge issue which leaders spoke at the Summit of the Future. India, as the country with the largest cohort of youth, has had an important role to play. If you look at our electoral processes, those who have just turned 18 are an important demographic for our political process. They not only take an active part in our polity, they also contribute significantly to the innovation in science and technology that you see in India. So youth will emerge as a key issue, and when the tale of the tiger is told, it will be told by the cubs and the young tigers. Thank you very much for your attention.
When you are invited to a dinner discussion by a think tank, we serve you food, but we also serve you research, because that's our dharma. So let me request my colleagues to play a short video. We want to release a publication today, copies of which are available in the room, and they can also be downloaded for the digital versions from the ORF and the Reliance Foundation websites. But can I request my colleagues to release this publication through this video?
As the UNGA deliberates at the Summit of the Future and we strive towards achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the world requires bold objectives post-2030 for accelerated progress. Building a resilient future beyond 2030 requires addressing the key global challenges. This India Day, we come together to commit to new ideas and innovative solutions to respond to the challenges and opportunities of today and tomorrow. Knowledge sharing is key to creating a resilient, inclusive and sustainable world. India and the Global South's progress on the SDGs and innovations has the potential to lead the development story for the world. And this forms the foundation of the ideas presented in The Next Frontier, charting the contours of the post-2030 development agenda. This publication highlights insights in 27 essays from global experts on strategies for driving inclusive transformation, fostering resilient progress, and advancing sustainable development. These essays are a call to action and a roadmap to guide us towards crafting a sustainable and inclusive future together. This publication is a collaborative effort by Reliance Foundation, Observer Research Foundation, and the United Nations India.
A quick shout out to one of the editors of this publication that was produced over a year's time frame and had 27 authors from different parts of the world. Vinita is with us. Vinita, well done. Congratulations. The ambassador made an important point about the Cubs telling the story, investing in the youth, investing in young voices, young women voices. And our next speaker today is someone who has been leading crucial work at Reliance Foundation that engages with a diverse set of communities in India and works with them to build solutions across domains and sectors that are both contextual and impactful. Youth, young women, these voices are important for the future, and the Reliance Foundation has been investing in those. It's my pleasure to invite Ms. Isha Ambani Piramal to speak to us this evening.
Good evening, distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends. I'm truly honored to welcome you to the third edition of India Day at the UNGA. This week, as leaders from around the world gather in New York to discuss equitable development, it is clear that our world is changing rapidly. India in particular is stepping into its rightful place, shaping the new global order. But this moment is more than just about change. It's about creating a better future together, especially for our youth. The challenges we face are many, but by working together, we can make real progress. Friends, it is my honor to share thoughts on Reliance Foundation at today's event, aptly called Tiger's Tail. In India, we worship Goddess Durga, who riding on a tiger is the embodiment of Shakti or strength. Hers is a strength that protects and promotes all that is good in the world. At Reliance Foundation, we're working with determination to channel our strength to create a more inclusive future for the next generations of India. Let me share with you our Pancha Tantra or 5 strategies. First, unleashing the power of women. As a woman, and now as a mother to a daughter, the empowerment of women is deeply personal to me. It's important more than ever in a country like India, which is home to more than 700 million women. It is vital for women to have the opportunities to thrive, to lead, and to shape the world around them. In the words of my mother, Isha Ambani, the founder of the Reliance Foundation, What women cannot achieve simply cannot be done. Women have always been the backbone of every society, nurturing families, driving development, and creating a more compassionate world. Let me share the story with you of Sanju. Sanju Nagpure, once hesitant to even hold a mobile phone, now soars through her fields with a drone in her hand. With the help of Reliance Foundation's digital farm programs, which especially works with women, she not only learned modern farming techniques, but also found the confidence to help others via the Government of India's Drone Didi program. From soil to sky, her journey is a testament to resilience and the power of belief. Sanju's story reminds us, when we empower women, we don't just lift up individuals, we lift up entire communities. Second, unlocking the power of youth. We all know the limitless potential and dreams that come with youth. Many of us in this room today were fortunate and privileged to grow with opportunities that nurtured our aspirations. It is critical for every young person to have the chance to dream big and make those dreams a reality. At Reliance Foundation, we invest in our youth through education, skills training, and sports so that they can pursue their passions and create the future that they envision. We have seen firsthand the transformative power of this investment, not just through numbers, but through the stories of young individuals who have risen beyond their circumstances to achieve greatness. Here in New York, a stone's throw away from us is the famous Times Square. I'd like to share the inspiring story of Shivam Chirolia. A brilliant student, Shivam was awarded the Reliance Foundation Postgraduate Scholarship for India's brightest students. He not only graduated his master's in artificial intelligence with flying colors and landed a dream job, but was also featured along his family on a Times Square billboard for his moving story. The Reliance Foundation Scholarships is India's largest scholarship program and aims to give wings to the dreams of over 5,000 students each year. My parents, Neeta and Mukesh Ambani, are deeply committed to ensuring that millions of children across India have access to quality education via various programs that the Reliance Foundation runs. Third, enabling the power of partnership and innovation. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned from our chairman, my father, Mukesh Ambani, is that progress is never made in isolation. Partnerships are the true force multipliers of innovation. At Reliance Foundation, one of our greatest privileges is to be able to collaborate with a number of partners, including NGOs, philanthropic foundations, academic institutions, and governments, to work together to solve some of the greatest challenges of today. I'd like to thank our partners for your continued commitment and for all that you do. Many are here with us today, including United Nations India, Observer Research Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, GSMA, British Asian Trust, and Vital Voices. Fourth, the power of digital technologies. We at Reliance are rapidly evolving towards becoming a deep tech-driven company across all our verticals, including Reliance Foundation. Digital technology is no longer just an enabler. We have witnessed how affordable, high-speed data has connected millions, empowering communities and transforming lives. The future is exponential. From education and healthcare to entrepreneurship, digital inclusion has opened doors for individuals in ways that were unimaginable just a few years ago. As we continue to push the boundaries of what's possible with deep tech, we are committed to ensuring that advancements benefit everyone, particularly women and underserved communities. Our work is centered on the belief that technology that can democratize opportunity, and we are excited about the future it promises. As part of Reliance Foundation's commitment towards accelerating these efforts, this week we were proud to announce that we are coming on board as a global anchor partner for the Women in Digital Economy Fund, together with USAID and the Gates Foundation. We will support innovative solutions in India to help achieve the 2023 G20 New Delhi Leaders' Declaration of closing the gender digital divide by 2030. Fifth, crafting a bold vision for the future. My grandfather, Dhirubhai Ambani, believed in dreaming big and thinking bold. It's that belief that guides all of us at Reliance and Reliance Foundation. It is his boldness that drives our vision for the future and pushes us to aim higher in everything that we do. Till date, our work has touched the lives of over 77 million Indians, over 55,000 villages and urban locations. As we approach Reliance Foundation's 15th anniversary, we are committed to scaling our impact exponentially in unprecedented ways. Our motto, Growth is Life, fuels our ambition to make a lasting difference. We are committed to working hand in hand to build a future rooted in peace, progress, and shared prosperity. As India's ancient wisdom teaches us, the world is one family. Together, we can walk this path towards a brighter, more inclusive future. Thank you for patiently allowing me to share our thoughts on the Reliance Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha. Now we move to the next segment, which is the headline panel discussion this evening on the tiger's tail. May I invite the panelists to join me on stage. Dr. S. Jaishankar, Minister of External Affairs, India. Hilton Todd, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Guyana. Minister Baiba Braz from Latvia. Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, Group Chairman, DP World. Borge Brende, President, World Economic Forum. You have your name tags next to the seats, and please join me on stage. And I will just get into a conversation with you. Dr. Jaishankar, I normally come to you very late in the panel. I thought I'll start with you this time. We'll flip it around. Okay? Sitting close to, and before we move to the core panel, I just thought maybe do some India questions for you, since we have heard a bit about India's story. Sitting in New York next to the Wall Street, how's the India stock doing? Brand India.
I think Brand India is doing well. It's doing better. And if I reflect on the last few days, I think there's more political respect. It's not easy in democratic politics to get 3 successive terms. I think most people in the political business certainly recognize and respect that. I think there's also more economic respect, the fact that we are today back into the 8% in terms of growth rate, come out of the COVID, and people can see that, there are decades of growth ahead of us. More technology respect. So it could be the moon landing, the digital infrastructure, the vaccines, the innovation, startups, the semiconductor, that whole thing. And I would say particularly in the UN, a kind of a sentiment respect, that a sense that we are a country with a heart, that we have that feeling for other countries and other people, which I think is most vividly expressed in the fact that we have brought Global South back into conversations in the UN.
Dr. Jaishankar, you have clearly, along with the Prime Minister, been scripting the tiger's tail. In the next 3.5-4 years, as we look ahead, what are the ambitions around multilateralism? Since we have made a bold pact for the future that claims to transform global governance, what are those transformations going to look like? You have the pen. Now tell us those transformations that we should try and achieve.
Look, I think there'll be a lot, but if I were to pick 2 or 3 big changes, not just for India, but for the world, because the pact of the future is for the world. A lot of the pact was centered around the SDGs, and the SDGs is really giving the ability to people to realize the potential. What we are looking really is genuinely global development, which will allow the diversity, the natural diversity of the world to express itself. But when we speak about that, I think a big part of it is democratizing economics. Typically in the UN, we speak about making politics more democratic. But if you don't have, if you don't have production across the world in different geographies, you're not going to get really an equitable world. It's one big takeaway from the COVID era as well. The over-concentration, the reliance on limited geographies for the needs of the world. So for me, how to democratize economics is one. How to democratize technology is another. And that's where I think digital public infrastructure is a very big piece. Perhaps how to democratize the global workplace. There is a mismatch there's a demographic mismatch today where there's demand, there isn't enough supply. So how do we do that in an orderly, acceptable way? I think these would be some of the big issues which both underlie the Pact of the Future and would be reflected as the Pact of the Future unfolds.
Pact for the Future also talks about peace and security.
Yes.
And you've been traveling to Ukraine, Moscow, a few other capitals. Are you investing in peace?
Yes, we are. I think we are today, looking at two major conflicts going on simultaneously. And it's been a long time in global history that we've had, that. And the challenge, I think, is the Ukraine war is now in its third year. Next month we would be seeing the second year of the conflict in Gaza. Issue facing, I think, the world is whether you watch impassively and perhaps with a degree of fatalism for all of this to work out, or whether countries are prepared to be more active and do something about it. And I think we have decided that we would. It's reasonable, it's responsible to do something about it, and I think that's part of the reason why those travels which you referred to.
Minister Todd, let me turn to you. We have a pact, but a pact, if it has to be implemented, requires leadership. Where is that leadership going to emerge now? We have the rich countries busy with their own politics and conflicts. We have the South perhaps disjointed in some extent, but also busy in fighting their daily fires. Who is going to lead a coalition that is going to achieve the visions in the pact?
Thank you very much, and congratulations to Reliance as well as your research outfit, and UN, of course, with India being one of the founding members. I think the answer is right here on the stage. But allow me to explain. So we have a story to tell as well. We are a small country. We are inherently vulnerable. If you use the World Bank and CARICOM definition, you're talking about a country population size of 1.5 million or less. So you're inherently vulnerable. Your market size, resources, labor. So we're challenged, but we are a nation state. And we have to participate and compete globally. So if you look at when India would have been part of the leadership in forming the United Nations, we still had empires. We've moved towards nation states. We've moved from a world that was unipolar, bipolar, and one would argue now it's multipolar. You have a world system that has outlived the rules across the board. So if I fast forward to looking at the summit of the future, reflecting on the SDGs 2030, world leaders recognize that we've only achieved 17% success. So where are we? Something is definitely wrong. And as we know, numbers don't lie. If you interrogate the numbers, you will see that something went wrong. We need to find out what went wrong. That understanding and that appreciation lends itself to the fact that we know what the problem is. We've identified the problem or problems. We know. We have to have the political will now to deal with it. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about leaving no one behind. And for us as a small state, we can argue that we're on the periphery, but then we still have to participate. We still have to speak up. We still have to be engaged. But we do that successfully because we are depending on the leadership of countries like India. Now, India has had her own journey. Thousands of years of civilization, of course. It is a mecca for spirituality. It is a mecca, an economic powerhouse today. It is the largest democracy in the world. And if India can do all of that and shine endogenously, naturally, they can export a lot of what they have done endogenously. Their culture, expanding their markets globally, but more importantly, getting involved in developmental projects globally. And I can speak at length on the partnership that India has had with Guyana. And I've also mentioned this in previous conversations right here in New York, the way India handled vaccine distribution and bringing more equity to vaccine. And this is that human touch that you have to have as policymakers. Because at the end of the day, it is about humanity. And I've said this time and time and time again. It's about humanity. So when we go to the summit of the future, we're going right back to mechanisms that we have in place already, but we just cannot seem to settle down. And that void that has been created based on the lack thereof of leadership by the industrialized economies, the emerging economies are taking over. And of course, India is taking leadership. They're not only doing it at home, they're doing it right here in the financial capital. So you can tell that they've made great strides, and we are pleased to be part of the Global South, where we are now demonstrating to collectively leadership at the highest level, which is the multilateral level. And I will leave it there for now.
No, thank you, Minister. Let me come to Minister Breze from Latvia. And from a European perspective, the Pact for the Future, how do you assess it? And more specifically, if we were to be honest, two big ambitions of the multilateral system were global equity, that is the development agenda, and global peace, that's the peace and security pillar. Both seem not to be working. So if you are sitting in Europe, how do you assess this Pact for the Future, and what can be done to lead it to in the right direction?
Thanks for having me. And I will start just by saying a few words about Latvia. For some, it's a big country, twice as big as the Netherlands. We ourselves think of ourselves as a small country because it's only 2 million, or as my colleague said, together with India, we are 1.6 billion. But, because of that, we ourselves have chosen a particular way of development, which is a real hard investment in digital, in infrastructure, in e-government, because we want people to have the access to the services wherever they are, instead of sitting at your doors and being grumpy there and being grumpy together with others. It's better if they are in their house or in their car or elsewhere and getting service and access and anything that matters. So that has worked. It has turned us also into a particular type of economy, which is mostly ICT and a lot of services. So stemming from that, we also sort of tend to be very acceptable to the others. We don't have a colonial history. We were occupied by ourselves. So we understand African countries, we understand India, we understand Guyana, but also we are a very European country because we're a member of the EU and NATO. So for us, clearly, the peace and security is enablement for prosperity. If there is no peace and security, it's very difficult to imagine the dreams of your children, grandchildren to be implemented. So peace and security, that's why the UN was created. And that's why at the end, when we think about our countries, we invest in defense and security, we analyze threats, and we make sure that the basics are there. And that's India or Latvia or Guyana or any other country. But for Europe as such, it's obviously something that we are still the biggest development aid provider in the world from the EU. We will continue doing that. But we, as the EU, don't have the hard security means to actually defend ourselves as the EU, as the supranational organization. So the work with NATO, together with NATO, with our transatlantic partners, with the US where we are, is essential. It is enablement for sort of that hard security part. So from there on, also the assessment of the future, the summit of the future, the reflection of how we think about the future is derived. So clearly the UN Security Council in its current way, the governance institutions of the UN are not in the shape we would like it to see. So what do we do about it? Are the permanent members going to allow other permanent members with veto rights to be joining the council? That's a good question. I don't see that happening. So what is the answer? Non-permanent seats. India is clearly a candidate. Others from other continents. We as Latvia, we stand in favor of that because we do think that the main governance institution of the UN needs reform. So we clearly support the Asian additional seats, the African additional seats, the Pacific, and so on and so forth. How do we get there? In our belief, we should be starting to draft actually a text, which we have refused to do, which just not happened. But we have been successful as a membership in increasing transparency, in increasing the methods of work of the Security Council. So if a permanent member vetoes a resolution, whether it's on Ukraine by Russia, whether it's on anything else, on North Korea by China, it can still be brought to the whole membership of the UN, making it inclusive, making the leadership happen at a wide members level. And I think that is crucially important to also have that role by the countries played there. Then on the SDGs and the development aids, at the end, I think we all will agree that one way or the other, it's about governance, that we do need that leadership and governance at the national level, regional level, of course, multilateral level. And one way or the other, we are trying to do our best. India has been doing actually great overall. And I fully agree to what my colleague from Guyana has said. It's not only economic powerhouse, it's a civilization, and it has the highest respect. So for, SDGs as a slogan is one thing, but actually what you deliver on the ground for the people in this world where the societies are much more decentralized because of the connectivity, because of digital development. It's not anymore a sort of one way of governing. It's more like some type of decentralized type of connections that we need to build. That is something that also applies to how we develop. And there, I can't speak fully on behalf of the EU, but I think there the challenges for Europe is even bigger because the traditional political parties, the political center that we have known, the ideology, traditional ideology, is actually weakening. And I think that is the biggest challenge for Europe for the future.
Thank you, Minister. Let me turn to the business community here, or the two leaders from the business community on this panel. Let me first speak to Chairman Sulayem on the role of the private sector and how can they shape, affect, implicate the future journey through their own commitments to projects and investments and certain projects. So the next round of development will require big companies that have treasuries bigger than nations to take responsibility and invest in empowering and uplifting populations. And so your perspective on that.
Well, the private sector is responsible for 70% of the GDP in the world. So naturally, their role is very important. And we can play a role by advising many of the leaders that we do business in their country. I mean, today, always public and private partnership works very well. We are in over 100 countries today, and all our business is private and public partnership. And there, we really work with the policymakers. Today I met the new president of Senegal and we talked about his vision and we advised where we lack because we were there and we understand that. Similar, we spoke to Nigeria, which is a big country that doesn't have enough ports. And the logistic is very bad. So we have a Syria. And in addition, today, with all geopolitical issues and even incidents of piracy and so on, all interrupt the supply chain. And we learned something really good during the pandemic. It's a bad thing that happened, but we learned that the supply chain is very weak. And a small incident in the Suez Canal where Ever Given ship was stranded for 40 hours. The cargo was delayed by 4 months. And so during the crisis, we learned that we have to find the new routes. So today, you have the issues in the Red Sea and other places. Today, we can take cargo through other routes. So we're very excited about this. I mean, we take, for example, cargo for Iraq. We take it from Karachi through Iran to Iraq within 7 days, which is remarkable. So today, the issue with us, and I'm glad many people listen about infrastructure. In Africa, they need so many ways to reach cargo. I mean, you have to admit, many people around the world today, they cannot have access to the simple necessities that they need. Imagine they are the same people who cannot receive the vaccine. They are the same people who, when there is a crisis, you can't reach them. So the cost of logistics is very expensive. And sometimes when you look at about, for example, when there's a crisis and there is aid, probably 70% of the cost is just on transportation or the logistical delays. So we've been instrumental. We, for example, started a port community service, which is a digital system whereby anyone who wants to take his cargo out of a port, they go in the port community and they, from there, connect with customs, with everybody, and everything get done online. It saves time, it saves fuel, and it makes trade go faster. In Dubai, we call it Dubai trade. In India, we call it Bharat. And in Dominican, we call it some other name. These are all initiatives we did to allow trade to flow. Because trade today is responsible for moving hundreds of million people from poverty. It is the oldest business people had. And how do we make sure we shield them from the geopolitical issues? And the, and there is a big role for the WTO to really implement so many ways to remove non-tariff barriers and so on. And so a classic example is how we dealt with this as a country, actually, by bilateral agreements. We had a comprehensive agreement, free trade with India. That allowed very smooth movement of cargo. Immediately, the trade between India and Dubai and UAE went to $80 billion. 80 billion. And so that is also something that we pursue, and we encourage that countries have these bilateral agreements because it will remove many obstacles facing the natural movement of cargo.
I have one quick question. In this highly fractured political order, where you have some conflicts which are currently underway and some potential conflicts on the horizon, how do you invest in connectivity projects? How do you invest in building those links that are so important for development growth and meeting people's aspirations?
Let me tell you, trade is resilient. The supply chain is weak. And we saw the evidence during the pandemic. But trade is resilient, meaning people who want to buy something, they'll find it. And people who want to sell something, they'll find it. And that is the hope we have. We invest because we have so much knowledge of the business. Our ports are needed and necessary for the country to open to trade. And so, because of experience, we are not really worried about this. And also, we are investing in so many countries. And if one region has issues. Other regions are still working. So we are not really banking in one area. That's how we take it.
Borge, I'm going to turn to you. You wear two hats. One, of course, the former foreign minister, and now, of course, international institution that works in the intersection of government, industry, academia, and civil society. From your perspective, I think Dr. Jaishankar mentioned democratizing economics. Is that happening? Or are you seeing the concentration still with a few countries, few regions, few actors? How do we democratize economics? That's something that I think is a good question to chase.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the jury is out when it comes to your question. In the platform economy that we have now had for the last decade, it has been a tendency that the winner takes it all. You had to invest in your platform. If your platform was the preferred one, you could even grow into a private superpower. But you know, things do change a lot also when it comes to economies. So it is not a priori given that those that do well today will do well in 20 years. If you look at the companies today with the largest market cap, if you look at the 10 companies globally with the largest market cap, most of them did not exist 25 years ago. So there is not given that that will continue if you do well today. I think you have to fight for that every day. Secondly, the big game changer, and that has to be touched on when it comes to your question, is Gen AI and the big language models. We are now in the hardware phase. So now you need to invest billions of US dollars to build those language models. And of course, those that have a lot of capital will have then an advantage now in this phase. But you will later on get more into a software phase where you put applications into these language models. That opens also up for those that have qualified people and also have ideas. So I think the jury is out, but of course, if you're not digitally connected, and if you don't have the skills and you're not educated, you will have a hard time in economy that is more and more about knowledge. I think India, though, has proven that even if you started as a developing country, you can also leapfrog. India got connected almost overnight. I think Reliance also played a constructive role here because now a grandmother in Assam, she wires money to her grandson in Delhi and she knows how to do it, and it's free because if you have the device that is also much cheaper, you can do this very easily. So we are also seeing a big change in the trading pattern and what consumers are now asking for. Traditional goods are still important, but what is growing most? Digital trade. Digital trade is already 20% of the global trade and is growing 3 times faster than traditional goods. And then you have services, also important and growing much faster. And why is India doing well? There are many components there, but I think that when the demand is for digital trade and is for services, India is very well positioned. And here I do agree with Minister Jaishankar. The snowball effect is there now. So India is, if it continues with its reforms, destined to grow pretty fast in the coming decade. So overall, I'm very, as I said before, bullish on behalf of India. I'm also not so pessimistic when it comes to the global economy in general. We expect 3.4% economic growth this year, also for next year. Of course, trend growth over the last decades were 4%. So we need to get up there if we're going to see real poverty eradication, even more progress also in the emerging economies and the frontier markets. But it is not so bad. And where we are today in the US, last year we discussed, is it going to be a hard landing or a soft landing? There's no landing in the US economy yet. It's going to be probably soft, but it's doing incredibly well. And this country is also well positioned when it comes to AI. And I think in the coming 10 years, we will see the biggest revolution on productivity we've seen for many decades. And productivity, due to AI, productivity is prosperity. If you can produce higher up in the value chain and increase your productivity, then you get richer. And sometimes you really need to implement the right policies. We are talking here about a more fair world. I'm very much in favor of it. But you also have to take a responsibility yourself. Look at, for example, Kenya and South Korea. In 1960, they had identically the same GDP per capita. Today, the GDP per capita in Kenya and in South Korea is 32 times of the one in Kenya. There are many ways to explain that, but we know that also policies and the right conditions and transparency, fighting corruption, all this is incredibly important. And you see India's growth now is a result of the reforms India started in the 90s. That's when it took off. If countries stop reforming, we also will see very negative impact on the growth.
Borge, but a little bit of a pushback. You're placing too much burden on national governments. What about the enterprises within those countries? I mean, you work with lots of companies that are resident in different parts of the world. We see announcements around climate action. We see announcements around hard to abate sectors, and lots of us have done lots of work on getting companies to commit to that. Is it difficult to imagine commitments from companies on helping us achieve development goals? Why is it difficult for us to come up with a big statement that we 100 companies will work together to solve 3 problems or 5 problems or 7 problems?
I think Dr. Sultan touched on it when he said that the private sector is 70% of the global GDP. And what is the role of private sector? The private sector's role is to contribute to jobs, wealth creation, and I think those companies that are foresighted will also be taking responsibilities when it comes to environment. I think they will also deal well with their own human capital. And we see that those countries that also have companies that do grow, a strong private sector, are countries also doing well. But I think that we will increasingly see that large companies see it's also in their interest to contribute to the common good. And it's even more important than in the past, because now we have the biggest governmental debt globally since the Napoleonic Wars. So governments are poor and the companies have a lot of resources. And I hope that companies do put that capital into investment for the future. But that should not be a political decision. I think companies invest best their own money when they believe in their own projects. And that, I think, history has taught us. That's also the reforms in India from the 90s. I think when you left one model and went into another model, you see India that is moving now towards 10 trillion US dollars. And it's incredible. We should celebrate today, not my birthday, but what we should celebrate is that today I got calculations that 17% of the global growth this year, do you know where it comes from?
India.
It used to come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Somewhere else.
Yes,
Congratulations.
Somewhere on the northeast of India, yeah.
And 70% of economic growth, 70, more will come from Asia as such. So it's yes.
I want to feel nice about this, but there's a long journey ahead. Let me turn to Minister Jaishankar once again. I heard a couple of ideas here. One was bilateralism. I also heard about national policy making, right? So, Make in India celebrates its 10th year today, sir. I saw your tweet this morning.
That's also what we are celebrating.
Right? 10th year
Other
of
than
Make in
Borge's
India.
birthday.
Borge's birthday and Make in India.
17% of growth, it's 10 years of Make in India.
10 years of Make in India. So how do you square up a global compact when we have a tendency to now seek solutions in smaller groups? Bilateralism was one of the ideas. We also have plurilateral groups that you are a member of across geographies. How do you square up this whole internationalism with these small clubs and small coteries, as it were, of interests that have emerged? And of course, very self-focused industrial policies. I mean, IRA, for example, in the United States, the C-band in the EU, and Make in India, which we celebrate 10 years of.
I think the answer, Samir, is when you look at very complicated problems, the answer often tends to be all of the above, which means you will have bilateral solutions. You would have groups of countries coming together, minilateral, plurilateral, call it what you will. You will also have multilateral. Now, depending if the multilateral system was very efficient, it delivered, it carried everybody along, it was far-sighted, then obviously it would be in the driving seat. To the extent that it's less efficient or more dysfunctional, there's obviously the slack would have to be picked up by groups of countries working together, which has been very much the case, I would say, especially the last decade and a half, and by countries, bilaterally among themselves. So now, what is it we are really talking about? Since we are looking at the economy, I'm giving you that as a crucial example. One big concern that the economy has is how do you de-risk it? And to de-risk it, you have to create more options. I mean, we have a DP world here now. Connectivity. Today, the more connectivity choices there are, Mr. Sultan Ahmed spoke about one ship in the Suez Canal actually screwing up the trade between Europe and Asia. Now, if you have more corridors, you have more pathways, you have more ports, you actually have de-risked connectivity and made the world a much more efficient and secure economy. Now, connectivity is one, but I would say even production. When I said democratized production, if the bulk, 30% of the world's manufacturing is in one geography and something happens, and something did happen in 2020, then you are actually exposing the world to a high risk. So I would argue today that how do you spread production through the world is not, it's the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do, because that would ensure that you won't have those kinds of situations. And certainly in an era of extreme climate events, we're going to, the risks are going to grow, that geographies and pathways and connectivity corridors may come under threat. The other part of it is actually the positive side. How do you increase the growth factors? Now, Borge spoke about, productivity, that we're going to see a revolution in productivity. I totally agree with him. But I think productivity is one factor. Demography is one factor too. That unless we handle the mobility of talents and skills better, we're not going to get that kind of productivity which we are expecting. We need to look really at the global economy in a very different way. And that will involve a pact, because unless you are able to bring in the South much more deeply into the global economy and use their resources, that's a factor. And finally, there is the reality, which is that, like it or not, the economic issues are going to be looked at through national security filters. We're not going to be agnostic about choices. Every choice will have some implication, particularly in the digital era. Where your data resides, who processes it, is going to matter to you. You cannot say, I'll go to the most efficient place. The efficient place may make you uncomfortable. So I think there are some real issues out there, and those issues cannot be solved by a simple answer that, let the UN take care of it, let's do a great document and it'll unfold by itself. It won't. It will require all these bits and pieces to happen in a very messy and bumpy way.
Minister Todd, I saw you nodding a few times, so I think you have a few thoughts here.
Thank you very much. I'm listening keenly, and at At the core, every nation state has a story to tell. And you have to tell your story. And that is how you win friends, that's how you strengthen your partnerships. And that's how you create alliances as well, because it's about the coalition of the willing based on the like-mindedness of the particular phenomenon or issue at hand. And then you have those traditional friendships and partnerships that go so far back that you only continue to strengthen and deepen as you progress. But as you progress economically, you get to do more. Case in point, Guyana and India. Many people may not have known of Guyana pre-2020. You know, we've had our struggles, we've had our battles. We're a relatively new country. We became independent in 1966. But if you fast forward to 2022, we're the fastest growing economy in the world, growing at 64%.
64%.
64%.
I'm coming there.
You think about the natural endowment, and we have everything, including rare earth, gold, diamond, bauxite, oil and gas. We have a proven reserve of oil. I think it's 11 billion barrels. We're now very visible because of oil and gas. But we've had a story to tell all along. We've maintained standing forests, 85 to 86% forest cover. It's certified by R3s. We were able to monetize it. The standing forest is the size of Scotland and Wales combined. Sequesters 19.5 gigatons of carbon monoxide. So we're providing lungs for the earth. And land is finite. We have 8 billion people now. So it requires a concerted effort where countries become more and more aligned and start looking at the issues that are global, in effect. No country can solve the problems on its own now. We tend to look inward. We have to be able to act local because we have to make national policies, but you have to be able to think global because you have to have a global perspective. You have to have an understanding of how the world works on the global stage because we are globalized politically and economically and culturally. And we have to deal with these issues. And if we're going to take technology into consideration and migration, which pushes it, we see why we need to have balanced development. And that is why India has been doing so much, because if you advance only and everyone is left behind, it becomes problematic for you. And that is why we're seeing the kind of pull factors globally in terms of migration, crime, etc. And that is why development should be thought of as a right that everyone should benefit from. And you can do it. We have the models, we have the economists, we have the sociologists. We understand people, demographics. We have done a lot of studies. We have a lot of educated people globally, top universities. We have tons of PhDs in all of universities. They're there to fix problems. Why should we be in this issue? Why the disparity so much? Why are we still having wars and conflicts? We don't need to. We just need to pull ourselves together, put humanity first, and leadership is important now more than ever because we have the complexities of dealing with crimes and conflicts. In cases you're fighting people who are not in uniform. In urban environments. So we need to be able to resolve issues, get serious about people and humanity without any discrimination, race, religion, or where you reside geographically, and put people's lives first. On the economic side, countries don't compete. Firms compete. Firms have a role as well because they invest their money. They have to make good for the shareholders. Of course, it's about maximization of profits, but you also have to bring that socially responsible element involved because if we all are committed to the SDGs 2030, it's not just about the public the public institutions, it's about the private sector. And the World Economic Forum would understand it well because it's a private-public organization, bringing all the stakeholders together. Because all of these issues that we have to deal with, or the challenges, we require the input from the private sector, policymakers, civil society, and everyone. And we can do it together. We have the knowledge, we have the money. The world is not short of money. We're not short of money. We're not short of funding. We just need to have the will on the public side, on the private side, put humanity first, get these instruments out, make them actionable, not just a fantastic document, and let us make good on the people that we have been elected to serve. And my colleague here understands it all too well. We're representatives. We have to be able to provide hope for people. We're dealing with lives. We're dealing with people who have to go home to their husbands, their wives, their children, and to tell them why they're voting for this particular party or that particular party, because this party can provide you with hope. Dr. Jaishankar will represent you on the world stage. This is serious business. This is not theater. It's the lives we're dealing with when it comes to economic advancement or the protection against any threat. So we have to take it seriously. We have to preserve this earth, this planet. We have to look after the future of everyone. We start doing it nationally, but we also have to do it globally. And India, of course, is leading the charge. And small states like Guyana are happy to be on board.
Now, I'm absolutely out of time, but you have triggered something, and because I have to ask that question. I shouldn't, but I'm going to ask that question. We always talk about the engagement or the interaction between national politics and foreign policy, for example. Right? The future of SDGs and the elections that are underway in this country. I think a quick assessment from each one of you could be the nice final question that I pose to you. US elections and what could it do to the SDG agenda, to the global compact? Let's start with you. Short answers. You can also say agnostic, doesn't matter. That's also an answer.
The world looks at the US as the democratic leader of the world. So everything that happens here can have an effect on global politics. I think it's incumbent upon the institution here to ensure that the democratic system in the United States remain intact. I will leave it there.
That's very diplomatic, but I won't push you. Borge, you are not wearing a political hat. Please tell us, who are you voting for? If you were an American citizen.
So, as you know very well, Samir, the World Economic Forum is an impartial, neutral organization. So I'm not going to get into that. I do, though, want to just add I was pretty bullish on the global economy. I'm much more bearish on the geopolitics of the world. I think we're in a geopolitical recession, and we talk about multilateralism, but the reality is that we're moving, and I'm sorry to be that realpolitical, we have to have we have to analyze first and then look at how to deal with it. The reality is that we are moving partly into a multipolar world without well-functioning multilateralism. And that is not good. We tried it in Europe in the 1920s and 30s. We had very multipolar Europe, but we did not have rules and regulation or multilateralism, and it ended in the Second World War. So, this country is incredibly important, that's for sure. It's 25% of the global economy, 5% of the global population. But let's not forget, the world is still unipolar in one area. That's when it comes to military. Still, the 50% of the military capabilities of the world is still in the US. And US is a superpower without superpowers in this new world. So, what is happening here in the fall is very important, but is more important that even in a polarized world, that we can identify some areas where we work together. I think there are areas where the Chinese, Indians, Americans, and Europeans have so much of common interest that even if they compete, they can collaborate. climate change, cybercrime, traffic rules for AI, also creating the right conditions for the sustainable development goals so we can meet our overall target to eradicate all extreme poverty by 2030, because that is doable. It is doable.
Wonderful answer. That didn't answer my question, but
I think I touched on it.
Minister Brazil.
I fully agree. For any diplomat, any minister, commenting on another country's internal politics is a suicide.
But that's a European pastime when it comes to India. I mean, I learned about my elections from European politicians.
You will be, you know, just imagine.
Never.
Come on.
I think I want to still raise something that is, for me, very important, which is democracies. India, you know, we are all democracies. We are not so many in the world. We can be, you know, nobody's perfect, let's put it that way. But it's about the liberty of the people. It's about the respect of the people. It's about the life we want to live. And there was very interesting Brookings Institution research a couple of years ago, I think 23 actually last year, that in democracies, whatever ways and shapes they are, children die less after birth, people live longer, people are more prosperous, and so on and so forth. So at the end, it's about the values that we want to hold and how we gain to that. Today, the private sector is increasingly important. It's very difficult for governments to regulate. It's very because of digital, because of transnational nature of tech companies. Just look at the Apple in Ireland and so on and so forth. It's very hard. So that's why, for example, for us, the EU Commission provides that function, because at a national level, if Luxembourg had to go alone after the Apple, or if Ireland had to go after another company in a situation where certain rules or regulations are challenged, it would be impossible. So we have chosen that supranational model, which is also a challenge, which is very difficult to make it sort of work in an easy way. But the governance is so important, there's just no other way. So we do have to work together with the private sector about those sort of basic rules and regulations for democracies to continue to provide those conditions in which we all want to live. I mean, I can barely imagine anyone wanting to live in an autocracy where there is no creativity for businesses to create new models, new ideas, and so on and so forth. So I think nothing is absolute, but those basic enabling factors are very crucially important. And I agree that skills will be what makes us strong. And don't ask me about the US elections, I won't answer.
Okay. Sultan Ahmed, I won't ask you about the US elections. You have business to do.
Yes.
So that's a wrong question to you. But final words before I turn to Minister Jaishankar for his view on the US elections.
Yes.
But let me come to you.
I will pick up from His Excellency Jaishankar when he mentioned connectivity. This is very important. And I tell you a story where we tried an experiment. So we selected Mozambique, our port, selected Dubai and India, and created a group in our port in Mozambique, a group in our port in Dubai, and a group led by Rizwan in our port in India. And their mission is to interact with the traders and the exporters. And they ask them two questions. What are you selling? And they took note of it. What are you buying? And they took note of it. The same question was asked in the three areas. In 3 months, the trade was, extra trade was $3 billion. Somebody in Mozambique is desperate to sell something and he doesn't know where to sell it. And somebody in India needed that and doesn't know where to have it. And this is just, we call them trade corridors. We did it as an experiment and we were shocked.
So connectivity.
And now we are creating this. We did the same thing in Egypt, between Egypt and Rwanda. Egyptian producers in oranges, they don't have, access to some places. So we connected them with our logistic park in Rwanda. Today, in Central Africa, the largest supply of oranges come from Egypt, between our port there. So we need to do a lot of this ourselves.
Mr. Jaishankar, it is said that you know DC better than most people who live in DC. How is America voting this time?
Can I comment on him
Please.
before I come there? Last 2 days, I would have said I met maybe about 20 foreign ministers. And probably the question I got asked most frequently is, after October 7th, is the IMEC still a live idea? The India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So I think a lot of countries really have a very deep interest today in connectivity, definitely in Europe, in the Middle East, certainly in India. So I just want to reinforce that point. On your US election question, let me offer two observations. One, look, it's a very polarized election. I accept all that. But if you look at the last 4 years, it's quite clear that actually there's a significant amount of bipartisan consensus, especially on national security and foreign policy matters. So for the rest of the world, if we can stay out of the internal American debate, I'm not saying everything is going to be the same. Obviously, it's not. But there are high elements of continuity, and certainly I think for those of us in the Indo-Pacific, that is something which we recognize. The second, which in a way is coming out of Borge's observation, I think the world is also much more realistic. So when he says he's pessimistic about, the geopolitics of the world, I'm not, because I think it was dangerous to live in those nice sounding words which were being, in a sense, things were happening on the ground, and the rhetoric and the verbiage was something very different. And we were actually fooling ourselves about the real state of the world. And what has happened this decade, and a lot of it is due to what happened in the United States over the last 8 years or maybe a little bit more, has been, I would say, probably after 2016, that there's been a much greater American realism about the world. And I would argue that probably that's good for the world, because that allows us to know who we each are, and then, create a basis for a collaboration, which I think would be more lasting.
Wonderful. So I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I like the 3 words used at the very end: continuity, collaboration, and connectivity. And I think if you can get these 3 right, SDGs will be really given an impetus. Will be given a push up in their fruition. So I just want to thank once again the panelists for their wonderful interventions. And I went off the script, so apologies for that. I asked you some difficult questions, but you didn't answer them. So everyone is fine. Now, please join me in applauding this wonderful panel for their intervention this evening. And before we conclude, let me invite a member of the board of ORF, B. Srinivasan, to deliver a vote of thanks. Srini, you can please join us on the podium.
Thank you, Samir. For those of you who may not know, yesterday was Samir's birthday. I think he makes it a point to invite people who celebrate their birthday in this week, just to have more people to celebrate. Thank you, Samir. And thank you for the panelists, fabulous and fascinating conversations. And the other thing that, apart from connectivity, collaboration, I also picked up that, I think it is important to give platforms for the South, the voices from the South to be heard, as well as a platform to be given to the youth to be heard. Right? And I think, on both counts, India scores very highly. Every 4th young person is an Indian. Right? Every 6th person is an Indian, but every 4th young person is an Indian. So 25% of the world's youth is in India. So I think on both counts, India would naturally aspire to be a leader, both in the global South as well as this. It's been a great day. Thank you for the United Nations Permanent Mission in India, the UN, the Indian Consulate, for providing a space this morning for really great conversations on some of the lessons that we learned from all of the global south. Good exchange on several aspects. And today's evening session is a good culmination of a tiger's tour. I'm not sure whether it is tiger or lion.
No, it is lion. I took a liberty.
Sure, it's a big cat for sure. Anyway, we will not argue on that. Thank you very much, and I hope all of you enjoyed the sessions, both the morning session as well as today's evening session, as much as we enjoyed curating it. Really, thank you each and every one of you for coming all the way and spending so much of time with us. And we hope to continue these deliberations, and hopefully I take home with a lot of optimism that I heard a lot of things that would work well in the future for the world. I think the focus is that the South is getting a bigger voice and the youth is getting a bigger voice. And I think that is really scope for optimism. Thank you very much. And I'll just now invite you for a really gala dinner.